All right, by request, I'm going to get a little more rock and roll. I'm going to perform this poem, The Extremophile. It's one of the many nightmares in the Xenotext. This is, in effect, a grand allegory about the badassness of poetry. It's entitled The Extremophile. Astronauts fear it. Biologists fear it. It is not human. It lives in isolation. It grows in complete darkness. It derives no energy from the sun. It feeds on asbestos. It feeds on concrete. It inhabits a seam of gold on level 104 of the Muppeneng mine in Johannesburg. It lives in alkaline lakelets full of arsenic. It grows in lagoons of boiling asphalt. It thrives in a deadly miasma of hydrogen sulfide. It breathes iron. It breathes rust. It needs no oxygen to live. It can survive for a decade without water. It can withstand temperatures of 323 degrees Kelvin, hot enough to melt rubidium. It can sleep for 100 millennia inside a crystal of salt buried in Death Valley. It does not die in the hellish infernos of the Stadtbibliothek during the fire bombing of Dresden. It does not burn when exposed to ultraviolet rays. It does not reproduce via the use of DNA. It breeds unseen inside canisters of hairspray. It feeds on polyethylene. It feeds on hydrocarbons. It inhabits caustic geysers of steam near the Grand Prismatic Spring in Yellowstone National Park. It thrives in the acidic runoff from heavy metal mines depleted of their zinc. It abides in the shallows of the Dead Sea. It breathes methane. It can withstand temperatures of 333 degrees Kelvin, hot enough to melt phosphorus. It resides in a fumarole of scalding seawater deep in the bathyal fathoms of the mid-Atlantic ridge. It can endure pressures equivalent to 45 tons of force per square inch, 6 times greater than the pressure at the nadir of the ocean, 1/16 of the pressure required to crush graphite into diamond. It lives in the muck at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. It is ideally adapted to devour the wreck of the Titanic. It does not die during its own immolation in the Nazi bonfires at the Opernplatz in Berlin. It eats jet fuel. It feeds on nylon byproducts. It feeds on stainless steel. It inhabits an extinct volcano in the xeric waste of the Atacama Desert, where the rain falls only once per century. It dwells in a tide pool of battery acid. It blooms in a barren salina 10 times saltier than the sea. It breathes hydrogen. It resides inside micropores of super-dense granite crushed down 3,000 meters below the bedrock of the earth. It can withstand temperatures of 343 degrees Kelvin, hotter than the flashpoint of aerosolized kerosene. It is ideally adapted to devour the rubber tubing in the engines of the F-22 Raptor. It does not die in the explosion that disintegrates the Space Shuttle Columbia during orbital re-entry. It does not die among the tornadoes of hellfire raging unchecked in the oil fields of Kuwait during the Persian Gulf War. It gorges on plumes of petroleum venting from the wellhead of the deep water horizon. It eats arsenic. It eats uranium. It resides inside the core of reactor number 4 at Chernobyl. It thrives in the topsoil of battlefields contaminated with toxic doses of lead. It thrives in hydrochloric acid. It can withstand temperatures of 373 degrees Kelvin, hot enough to boil the water in its own cells. It is ideally adapted to dwell inside the steel drums of radioactive waste, now entombed at the Yucca Mountain Repository. It lives in the stratosphere. It can survive exposure to the vacuum of outer space. It can survive the effects of G-forces more than 2,000 times greater than the surface gravity of the Earth. It is the only known organism capable of exceeding speeds of Mach 1. It does not die in the furnaces reserved for the satanic verses after the fatwa issued by the Ayatollah of Iran. It can, in fact, repair damage to its own genome so fast that its DNA never mutates. It never changes. It never evolves. It devours plutonium. It can endure long-term exposure to acids that eat away at human flesh. It can withstand temperatures of 383 degrees Kelvin, hotter than the polar zones on the planet Mercury. It can hibernate for 500 millennia in the core of a snowflake deep beneath the permafrost of Siberia. It awaits discovery in the abyssal fathoms of Lake Vostok, 4,000 meters below the ice of Antarctica. It survives direct immersion in liquid nitrogen. It survives 1,000 times the dosage of gamma radiation that can instantly kill a human being. It is ideally adapted to eat hot graphite in the ruins of Unit 2 at 3 Mile Island. It resides on the surface of a heat shield in the clean room at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. It is fossilized inside the Murchison meteorite. It does not die in the conflagration during the collapse of the World Trade Center. It does not die in the crucibles of Treblinka. It resides in a soda lake whose pH level equals the alkalinity of lye. It can survive superheated blasts of steam for 10 hours inside autoclaves used to disinfect surgical scalpels. It can withstand temperatures of 393 degrees Kelvin, hot enough to melt sulfur. It can lie dormant for 40 million years, hibernating inside the gut of a honeybee shrouded in a jewel of ember. It evades its predators by hiding in the firmware of the Intel Pentium 3 microchip. It propagates itself through the use of networked computers. It can pass itself off as a thought inside the human brain. It can survive direct blasts of cosmic rays from solar flares. It is, in fact, the only known organism to survive being shot point blank by the proton beam in a U-70 synchrotron. It does not die in the incineration of Hiroshima. It does not die in the planetary firestorm after the impact of the Chicxulub meteor. It does not die. It survives. It persists. It resides inside the robot scoop of the Viking 1 lander during tests for perchlorates on Mars. It can live through exposure to supercoolant temperatures at the brink of absolute zero. It can hibernate for 250 million years, living as a spore encased in a halite nodule found in the caverns of Carlsbad. It can withstand temperatures of 423 degrees Kelvin, hotter than the nose cone of the Concorde in supersonic flight. It can endure multiple meteor impacts. It can endure multiple atomic attacks. It lives nowhere on Earth except in one petri dish of agar-agar, locked in a fridge at a level 4 biocontainment facility. It is totally inhuman. It does not love you. It does not need you. It does not even know that you exist. It is invincible. It is unkillable. It has lived through 5 mass extinctions. It is the only known organism to have ever lived on the moon. It awaits your experiments.